With a lot of cases, the most obvious answer is usually the correct one. TV and movies make murder mysteries look like some bizarre game of cat and mouse, where police deep dive into every wacky theory they can come up with. But that just isn't the case in real life. In real life cases, investigators have limited time and budgets, and the best way for them to work with that is to look at the most reasonable explanation for someone's death or disappearance. But what happens when it looks to be the most obvious answer is the furthest thing from the truth? The case we are looking at today had so many wild twists and turns that it's kind of amazing to me that it was ever solved. From stalking to hitmen, the murder of Natalie Bollinger is not a case any of us are going to forget soon. Let's dive in. Natalie Marie Bollinger was born on February 24th, 1998 to her parents Rose and Ted Bollinger. But she didn't come into this world alone, as she had a twin sister named Alicia. Natalie lived in a couple different places during her life, but spent the majority of it in Colorado, where her family settled in Broomfield. It was well known that Natalie loved social media and posted a lot on her Facebook page, sometimes posting super personal stuff about her everyday life. But in 2017, she posted something pretty concerning. She was calling out her stalker, Sean Schwartz. Natalie and Sean met a few years prior when Sean was homeless. Along with many other people living on the streets, he was staying near a public library known as The Park. Natalie and Alicia would often go to hang out and smoke with people that were staying there. Another friend, Megan Nicole, stated that a lot of the time, the girls would stay there overnight. Years later, Sean never got over his infatuation with Natalie, and some of the stuff he did and said was kind of scary, as detailed in Natalie's Facebook post about him. He drove across country to see me, slept behind my work for weeks. When I told him I didn't want to see him anymore, he sent me hundreds of texts and calls. He parked his car in front of my house, blocking Military Highway for hours, laying on his horn. Things got so bad that Natalie had to take out a restraining order against Sean, hoping that would finally keep him away. Just days later, she vanished. On Thursday, December 28th, 2017, Natalie was totally radio silent. As someone constantly on her phone and with a small following on social media, people in her life worried when nobody saw or heard from her that day. Her family decided to report her missing, and straight away, suspicions around her disappearance turned to Sean. Unfortunately, if not dealt with properly, many cases of stalking can end in tragedy, and even then, 54% of women who die at the hands of a stalker contact the police before things get to that level. Sean certainly didn't help his case by taking to social media to share his thoughts and opinions on the case. Almost every day he would post something about Natalie on his Facebook page in a desperate attempt to prove that not only was he innocent, but Natalie had no reason to fear him. Sean shared numerous screenshots from conversations they had months prior that gave the impression that he and Natalie actually used to be pretty good friends. In fact, according to Sean, Natalie often shared her problems with him and counted on him for other support. He revealed that Natalie was struggling with sobriety, and he had traveled across the country to help her after she told him she was feeling low enough to end her own life. On the flip side, more screenshots of texts between Natalie and an acquaintance were shared where the total opposite seemed to be true. Natalie told the acquaintance that she was scared after finding out Sean had gone out of his way to visit her. Police were patrolling her neighborhood, and she was keeping a loaded weapon close by. She also said that if anything ever happened to her, to look at Sean. Whatever happened between these two to destroy their friendship and make Natalie that afraid of Sean was a real point of concern. Internet sleuths and authorities were particularly worried about one post by Sean where he addressed Natalie directly and said he wanted to die by a self-inflicted gunshot in front of her. However, Sean was totally cooperative with the police in this case, and he was ruled out pretty quick. He attended multiple interviews and provided them with access to anything he could have used to contact Natalie. Despite the issues that had transpired between them, the authorities were hesitant to make him a suspect, although he remained a person of interest. Natalie's body was discovered just one day after she vanished, and unfortunately, she was not found alive. An autopsy confirmed that she died from a bullet wound to the back of the head, although at the same time, she had multiple narcotics in her system. Her missing persons case was quickly transferred to a homicide. As before, everyone jumped on the theory that Sean was behind the whole thing, but this time, some came to his defense. Natalie's friend Megan Nicole stated that she didn't think Sean was capable of harming anybody. She also described him as a generous man who was always willing to give, even when he had nothing, and murder was too far-fetched for him. It was always clear that Sean was dealing with demons of his own, and he talked about this in a Facebook Live video. He suffered from psychological problems for years and was diagnosed with Asperger's. During the investigations in early January, Sean was actually detained and hospitalized after law enforcement received a report that he was talking about harming himself. This still wasn't enough to keep the internet from suspecting him. Then, on February 8th, the entire course of this case took an insane turn. After reviewing the contents of Natalie's phone, a totally new suspect entered the picture. Joseph Michael Lopez was a 22-year-old man from North Glen and wasn't the type of guy you'd peg as a dangerous criminal. He'd had a steady job at Domino's and he had a fiance, but he had a different side to his personality that he never talked about. There were a total of 111 messages exchanged between him and Natalie, and it paints a totally different picture of what everyone thought happened to her. According to Joseph, Natalie asked him to kill her. In his affidavit, he explained that he met Natalie on Craigslist after discovering a listing titled, "I want to put a hit on myself." Joseph posed as an experienced contract killer and contacted Natalie, telling her he would take the job. In his interview, he said his real intention was to get help for her, but clearly that never happened. He spoke to her under the alias of Akai. Joseph was into online gaming and had a few different personas he liked to play as, Akai being one of them. Natalie agreed to meet with Joseph on the day she vanished, and in his testimony, he states that at first they just drove around for a while talking. He claims he tried to convince her not to go through with it, but Natalie was certain this is what she wanted. He parked the car near Riverdale Road, just 20 minutes away from where Natalie lived. After they got out of the car, Natalie told him how she wanted him to do it, and they prayed together. Then, Joseph shot her in the back of the head and left. Of course, police picked up inconsistencies in his story straight away. First of all, if he truly wanted to help Natalie, then he so could have. After they made contact on Craigslist, she gave him her phone number and her address. He could have sent emergency services to her home then and there. Plus, if he wanted her to back out, then why would he still carry out the hit? He could have taken her to a hospital. He could have just told her no and left. But he still went through with it. Another interesting point was the persona he was acting as. Akai, who lures people in before he strikes, doesn't sound like the kind of person who wanted to help Natalie. In the eyes of the investigation, Joseph had taken advantage of a girl going through a dark period in her life and used that as an excuse to kill somebody. Joseph was arrested for Natalie's murder, but to the dismay of her family, he was offered a plea deal. To avoid a potential lifetime in prison, he pled guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 48 years in prison, followed by 5 years of parole. Despite the lengthy sentence he received, Natalie's family denied that there was any justice in this case, and what they really wanted was an eye for an eye. As for Sean, he never stopped posting about Natalie and still talks about her on Facebook to this day. For the most part, it seems like most people are leaving him alone and recognize that he's clearly someone who needs help, not to be hounded by haters online. What do you guys think of this case? When I first heard about it, like many other people, I was certain Sean had something to do with it, but the fact of what really happened just goes to show we can't jump to conclusions about this stuff. I can't wait to see your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.